An era comes to an end as unceremoniously as you'd expect for Master System. On Segaiden episode 87.
It's just... it's musical chairs.
This week's pair of games holds a special place in Sega's history. Namely, these were the final Master System releases to arrive in American stores before the launch of the Genesis, which changed not only the nature of Sega's own business, but also the landscape of the American console industry in general. And, Cloudmaster makes for a pretty decent little capstone. On one hand, it tidily embodies the essence of the home console industry as it had existed for the past decade and change by being a really excellent conversion of an arcade game, the holy grail of early console gaming. At the same time, it does speak to new horizons and a broadening of cultural horizons for the medium in the US. By cultural horizons, I don't necessarily mean greater awareness and sensitivity to other places and peoples. Cloudmaster comes to us from Taito and developer Hot B, a pair of Japanese corporations, and it turns the classic Chinese legend of the Monkey King into an arcade shooter. This is not an exercise in cultural anthropology, attempting to relay the integrity of Chinese literature to an audience of video game enthusiasts. It's a game about taking the superficial visuals that you might associate with the word China and turning them into whimsical video game components. In addition to battling variants on the original Shitano, the four guardians of the Chinese zodiac, such as a phoenix and a turtle and so forth, and flying around on a cloud, you also have to take on flying formations of ramen, shumai, and mahjong tiles. Yes, Cloudmaster is a cute-em-up in the vein of Twinbee or Fantasy Zone, but even more so. I'd call it an entry in the parody game genre, a la Konami YY World, Parodius, or Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti, except that it's not satirizing another game property so much as lightly goofing on Journey to the West. Given Sega's habit of sticking an Alex Kidd sprite into other games during localization, I'm a little surprised that they didn't give this the high-tech world treatment. It would have fit pretty well. The protagonist, Michael Chen, don't call him Son Goku, is a little monkey-looking guy, just like Alex. Both guys did, after all, spill forth from the same font of inspiration. The same tale that Cloudmaster adapts directly, if whimsically, also served as the starting point for Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball saga, which Alex Kidd had originally been intended to adapt. It even kind of feels like a Miracle World shoot-'em-up. Twice during the course of each level, Michael has to fight a mini-boss that harasses you while you evade the regular patterns of enemies. Defeat the mini-bosses and a door opens that takes you to a sort of shop screen, kind of like the shops that Alex would encounter along the way. Now, there's no Fantasy Zone-style economy to worry about in Cloudmaster, so this isn't technically a shop. It's just a room where a helpful young lady lets you pick a free secondary weapon that you can use infinitely until you lose your current life. But even though this port was published by Sega and licensed from Taito and based on a Hot B coin-op creation, the development on this port was handled by a fresh new studio called Opera House. So they released it here as Cloudmaster without really changing much of the in-game content. In fact, they didn't even bother to provide in-game translations of the special weapons, or redraw the kanji of the game's logo, Chuka Taisen, on the title screen. And it kinda works. The unlocalized text adds flavor and a little bit of mystery to the game, whose setting of Chinese antiquity comes through clearly thanks to the visuals. And no, I don't mean the little swarms of dim sum, I mean the overall art style. Years before Nintendo harnessed the power of the Super FX2 chip to make Yoshi's Island look like it was drawn by a toddler with heavy markers, Hot B used the power of the arcade board that had powered the New Zealand story in order to present a world rendered in the style of classical Chinese watercolors. Even for suburban 80s kids in America brought up on a media diet of the equivalent of ham and mayo on white bread, this game would have read as taking place in ancient China. And all without resorting to overtly racist imagery, something that games and other media kind of struggled with all the way through, say 1997 or so. It's not as though the game applies any particular intellectual rigor to its setting and theme. After the first stage's showdown with Suzaku, the bosses in Cloudmaster tend to reflect more Japanese mythological themes than Chinese anyway. The mini-bosses riff on Raijin, the Japanese god of thunder. Later, you fight a Kappa, an iconic Japanese yokai, a river vampire that literally sucks ass, and what appears to be a Buddha decked out in Yakuza gear. In other words, Cloudmaster signals in many ways, both obvious and more granular, that you shouldn't take it too seriously, at least in terms of its theme. Gameplay-wise, Cloudmaster demands that you take it with deadly seriousness. You probably won't be surprised to learn that, as a horizontal shooter, it suffers from a case of Gradius syndrome. Now, you don't have Gradius-style control over Michael's weapon upgrade path, with Shumai formations simply dropping one of 3 different icons that upgrade your speed, firepower, and firing rate. Yet our hero becomes quite formidable once he's picked up a handful of icons and selected a secondary attack. At his base power level, Michael is a slow, fragile, weak little target. Once he's boosted his skills to about half of his max potential though, he becomes a speedy, deadly little guy. Though still fragile. A single hit will always do him in. And when that happens, it's back to a rare checkpoint, and back to base power level. This isn't unusual for the genre, but there's little on Master System more demoralizing than getting into the groove for a good run of Cloudmaster and jacking Michael to some insane level of power with a wide beam attack that clears out entire formations of enemies in a single shot flanked with secondary attacks that practically fill the screen, only to have some dinky little bad guy slip past and hit you with a tiny bullet from behind your back with no time or space to avoid it. But hey, at least developer Opera House did a good job with the hitboxes here and tuned the game so that you don't die from taking strays that come nowhere near to your sprite, a benefit you don't always get on Master System. Cloudmaster isn't amazing, but it looks really good. With its adorable sprites, artful backgrounds, and excellent color choices, it's easily one of the prettiest games on Master System, and actually does pretty good justice to the arcade original, all without bad frame rates or slowdown. Master System was of course predicated on the promise of great arcade conversions, so it's nice to see that remit being fulfilled even here as the system winds down, albeit not with a conversion of Sega's own property. And like I said, it offers a bit of a glimpse into gaming's future, an increasing acceptance of games that have an undeniable East Asian vibe in America. The Master System predates the wholesale embrace of anime by American nerdlings, which would begin a few years later with Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball. You know, the story based around the same classical tale as Cloudmaster. We've already begun to see localization relax a bit, with things like Bandai's Monster Party, which also featured tons of yokai and yakuza imagery mixed in among the Hollywood satire, shipping exclusively in the US. And publishers' approach to importing game content would continue to relax during the 16 and 32-bit eras. That makes Cloudmaster for Master System a mildly remarkable little release. I mean, as a game, it's nothing amazing, a pretty typical shooter with a Darius-like power-up system and a fun visual theme. But also, one that its creators really seem to love. Not only did it show up on a bunch of different systems in Japan around the time of the Master System release, it also received an inexplicable remake on Wii about 20 years later. And you can purchase a port of the arcade original on Switch, Steam, and PS4 today as Monkey King Master of the Clouds. They still haven't bothered to redraw that title screen logo, though. And finally, we have Wanted. You can be sure that title does not refer to the Master System. Not when we have the Sega Genesis lurking in the wings. As for the game, well, it has a few things going for it. Most notably, it's the final US Master System release to make use of the light phaser accessory. A few European and Brazilian light gun games would show up down the road, including Assault City, which Sega-obsessed commenters have assured me was meant to be another Zillion title. But here in the States, this is it. I can retire another accessory and not have to worry about its finicky screen detection tendencies. And as swan songs go, Wanted does a pretty good job of sending off the light phaser. Honestly, it feels like the culmination of all the light gun games we've seen to date on NES-era consoles. Considering the importance of the Zapper and the Light Phaser in the XG1 to Nintendo, Sega, and Atari's respective console efforts, this cartridge showing up on shelves on the eve of the Genesis launch makes for a strong wrap-up for the late 80s 8-bit revival period in general. Frankly, you couldn't ask for a better send-off than Wanted, a game that embodies much of the spirit of both the Master System and the NES. It's a breezy yet challenging and responsive light gun game that calls to mind Wild Gunman, Gangster Town, Gotcha the Sport, even a bit of Bank Panic, which wasn't a light gun game, but could have been. Wanted takes place across 6 stages, 4 of which are on-foot shootouts, while the other 2 take place on horseback. The horseback scenes specifically call to mind Gangster Town's car chase stages, though they adopt a side-scrolling viewpoint that Sega would revisit in Shinobi 3's auto-scrolling stages years later. The on-foot stages see your lone lawman making his way left or right through Old West scenes populated by outlaws who pop out of hiding or rush across the screen. As in Gangster Town, you need to hit the bad guys while taking care not to shoot anyone who doesn't pose an immediate threat. Not only the bustle-clad ladies out for a stroll, but also outlaws who have just decided not to attack. That's where the bank panic element comes into play. If you gun down an enemy who happens to be strolling across the screen without brandishing his sidearms, it counts as a miss and you're penalized a bit of health. Just like with the guys who whined unfair if you pop them before they raised their pistols to fire in bank panic. Every stage contains a few fun details, like barrels you can shoot to potentially reveal screen-clearing bombs, or bar shelves full of bottles that you can blast for no real reason besides chaos. Wanted doesn't bother to limit your ammunition or force you to reload your 6-shooter, instead encouraging pure wanton mayhem as fast as you can pull the trigger. After the second and fourth stages, you can take part in bonus challenges that test your aim and reflexes in different ways. The first bonus stage gives you a shelf full of liquor bottles to shoot, but only in the brief instance in which a cursor highlights that bottle, while the second level sends a stream of coins flipping through the air. Wanted lacks the extras that Gangster Town included, like a leveling mechanic and the ability to vanquish foes to eternal damnation by blasting their souls as they depart their bodies, but it makes up for it by being pleasantly unpunishing. You can tell Sega didn't develop this game because it includes 3 difficulty levels and infinite continues, rather than forcing you to play at max difficulty with no additional credits. According to the Game Developer Research Institute, Wanted was developed by Sanritsu, last seen making a bit of a hash of their Alien Syndrome port. Wanted nicely acquits them of that mess, combining elements of just about every 8-bit light gun game that preceded it into a fun, challenging referendum on the era. I don't think I need to explain the significance of Wild Gunman to Nintendo's launch again. No, it wasn't the NES pack-in, but it was a game that tied the NES most directly to Nintendo's pre-video game legacy and functioned as the light gun tentpole release in Japan. More interesting is the gacha connection, which isn't entirely incidental. I don't know that anyone necessarily thinks of gacha the sport as a formative or influential video game work, but the screen panning here as you advance through levels calls to mind the structure of that game, though here the action scrolls on its own rather than requiring players to attempt to juggle a controller and light gun simultaneously. And gacha may or may not have been developed by, yes, Sanritsu under contract for Atlas. The GDRI does seem a little ambivalent on that point, having previously pegged gacha as a Sanritsu production, but more recently walking it back to a maybe. Still, based on that site's legendary interview with Golgo 13 Top Secret episode designer Angela, gacha seems to have been the work of either Sanritsu or some of the company's staff, who would depart to establish Shimata Kikaku, aka S-Plan. And I think that goes a long way toward explaining why Wanted looks and feels and sounds, in some ways, more like an NES game than you typically see on Master System. And while Wanted does feel like a small summation of the previous 4 years of console gaming in America, it also speaks to the future. Sega and Sanritsu would soon form a joint venture called Sims, a sort of second-party studio that would be one of the most prolific developers for Genesis, Game Gear, and beyond, all the way through Sega's exit from the hardware business more than a decade later. For now, though, we're about to embark on Sega's most successful hardware effort of all time. So let's not think ahead to the dark days of financial overextension with Saturn and Dreamcast. Wanted here seems like a perfect milestone for Sega's US console efforts, the past and the future combined into a single excellent light gun game. Not a bad way to wrap Master System's run as Sega's American console representative, really. Next time on Segaiden, I think I'm seeing double 16 bits.